Hey guys, and welcome to another video. I'm cold, so I'm covered up with a blanket, but today I'm going to be reviewing the Acolyte episode 7. I almost forgot to do my review. It's 2:30 in the morning, and my sister and I watched it earlier. For me, because it's in the AM, I haven't gone to bed yet. It's not the next day. My sister and I watched it earlier around dinner time, so it's not quite fresh, but it's still the same day. So basically this was another flashback episode, and this was supposed to be the episode that kind of tells us the whole story. True to what Leslie Headland, the showrunner, and people in charge of it have said, is that the inspiration behind it is that there's this mystery and you get the same circumstance but from different perspectives as you kind of like, and each one kind of gives you more information on the quote mystery or event. It was taken from some old samurai movies. So we basically got a repeat of the first flashback episode, I think, which was episode 3, this time from the Jedi's perspective. So basically Soul and the other Jedi, like, it seemed random, like, why were they there? Why was he just so happened to be there to, like, observe the twins? And apparently they came to this world because it was, like, dead a couple of years ago, and now all of a sudden it's thriving with life. Which implies that the witches and what they've done with the twins and what they're doing here has brought life back to the planet, which is really, really lore-breaking. And it claims that, oh, a virgins can just create a thing, like create life. And, which is kind of following the theme. So basically Soul, is exploring and doing his work when he sees the twins, and literally a lot of the scenes are like, it's from a different perspective, but essentially like we get a lot of repeated scenes from the third episode, and as I was watching, and it didn't bother me, like some of the scenes were a little like replayed, but it did give you kind of a different perspective and kind of fill in the gaps. I've heard a lot of other Star Wars fans, Star Wars Theory being one of them, kind of get annoyed with that. It felt repetitive, but I didn't necessarily, I wasn't really like, it was kind of just like middle. I didn't have an opinion about it. But long story short, same thing where they go there, they confront the people, but it kind of implies that Soul, for some reason, has this weird fixation with Osha that's never explained other than he feels she's meant to be his Padawan. And for whatever reason, he's worried about the girls, even though from what he observed, there was nothing that the witches were, quote, doing that overly seemed like they were in danger. He did watch them train, so I mean, they were force pushed backwards, but like, it didn't seem like the witches were doing anything that would be like a red flag of, oh, okay, we need to rescue these girls. So essentially, they contact the Jedi Council, who says no. So at least the Jedi Council and the Jedi are still kind of like good-ish because they don't want to take the girls away from their mothers. But they decide to do in order to give them time to contact the council, they do the pretense of testing the girls, even though they have no intention of taking the girls, unlike what they told to the mothers. I don't know. And so after the council says no, they're all kind of talking, I don't remember the exact stuff, but basically, the Padawan, I know his name, he's the one who committed suicide. He's a Padawan. He's been whining the whole time about wanting to go home to Coruscant, which didn't make sense to me anyway, because it's like, if he wanted to go back to Coruscant so bad and he loved Coruscant, like he was in a Jedi temple on a completely different planet when he was older, which is when he committed suicide. So it's like, it doesn't make sense with his character, and that kind of seems to be the problem with this show. Like, there's a lot of problems with the show, but the characters don't have clear motivations. None of them do, and they only ever do like random things that the writers want them to do, and it's obvious, like, the characters just do things, and a lot of times they do things without clear motivations or reasons behind them or reasons why. And it's literally like they just kind of do whatever they need, the script and the writers need them to do in any given moment, and it's just really bad writing. But he is so homesick, he rushes off in a speeder because to take the girls, or I don't know what his intentions were, to end this kind of, and then so they can go home, even though they had orders not to take the girls. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. So then she tells Soul to go after him, but instead of going after him, they decide to sneak into the facility to get the girls together. And that spurs the conflict. So we do get to see one of the meetings of the witches, which is where the main leader, the woman who created the girls, is trying to convince the other witches to let Osha go with the Jedi because it's what Osha really wants. And meanwhile, the mother, the Zabrak woman who, quote, carried them, is rallying the witches to fight. So it honestly didn't portray the Jedi as bad as I thought. I was expecting it to be like all the Jedi fault, and it kind of is, but like the witches were getting ready for combat anyway. So basically they go in there, they try to talk to the witches, and the mother who, quote, created them, I did forget to mention, they tested the M count, so the midichlorian count of Osha and May, and this is before Torben. Torben's the Padawan. This is before Torben sped off on a speeder, but they tested their M count, and the girls' M count was high. It was so vaguely worded, because you know that they were trying to imply that they were like Anakin or more than Anakin, but they didn't want to actually say that they were over 10,000 midichlorian. So to try to avoid anything, they were just super vague with what their M count was, which M count is kind of weird anyway, because I thought that was what like Star Wars fans have dubbed it, even though it's formally called midichlorian count in episode 1. The M count is just kind of like a nickname that fans gave it, especially fans who weren't happy with the inclusion of midichlorians when it was first introduced in episode 1, but I digress. So when they found that out, for some reason, their midichlorian count being high and their symbiotes being the same implied that they were created, which didn't make any sense, because yeah, their symbionts wouldn't have been the same even as twins, but to then say that their symbionts, well, they must have been created, it's just a really weird jump that didn't have any logic behind it. And then that's why Torben ran off, let's end this, and he grabs his speeder. So anyways, him and Soul break into the place, and they're talking with the witches. And the witch mother who created them, he tries to get her to mention how she created them, and it still doesn't really give us any answers, I guess. And May runs in, and it says that she starts a fire, which it does give us the fire. So basically it's like she was holding a lamp that had some sort of oil on it, and she put that to the diary, and then when it lit on fire, for some reason it surprised her, as if her lighting the diary on fire, like, it did what it was supposed to do, but then that was like, oh, it's on fire, like, what am I supposed to do now? And she just freaks out and drops it. And at first it looked like it just ignited the floor, which is made of stone. The walls are made of stone, the ceiling is, the floor is. But I think my sister pointed out that there is oil on the floor, so it kind of implied that the lantern fell and ignited the oil, and somehow that climbed the wall and hit the electrical outlet, and then I guess that's supposed to explain how the fire went through the electrical system and lit everything else, I guess. So anyways, because of that, May runs in and she's like, there's a fire. So the mother who created them decides to like phase out into darkness, probably gonna take her and May to go solve the fire or to get May to safety. And she's not really got a weapon, and she's phasing out into darkness, so it's not clear what she's doing, but for some reason Soul randomly grabs his lightsaber and stabs her at random. This obviously aggravates the Zabrak chick, who's already been gearing for war, so she freaks out, fights Soul. He decides then at that point not to fight, even though she's the one with the weapon actually hitting him, so he killed the woman who wasn't fighting him, and then he refuses to fight the woman who's trying to kill him. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't know why. He basically stabbed the mother because the writers wrote it that way. There was no motivation or reason or anything to it. And then the witches are all gathered together doing their witchy woo stuff, and it implies that they took over Kalnaka, which is the Wookiee. Why him? I don't know. The writers wanted it to be the Wookiee because he's big and strong, and they made him fight Soul and Torben, which made for a good fight because he's a Wookiee, and that's the only reason why, even though he's a Jedi Master and he shouldn't have been so easily taken over. So that fight happens, and then Soul, no, not Soul, the other Master Woman who died in the very first episode, she finally gets through to Kalnaka, and for some reason when she's using the Force on him and she gets his mind back, it pushes the witches out of his mind, and then they all randomly pass out from that, and that's why they're all laying in a group, and it's implied that they died, I guess. Like, we don't know what happened, but they fell, and that's where they fell in the room, and that's where they're left in the room. So I don't know, did she kill them? I mean, it's really not clear. And then she tells Soul to go get the girls. At this point, I don't know why, because they weren't even supposed to be here in the first place, and she didn't really seem like she was disciplining him. So he runs to go get May and Osha, and they're on the bridge, but we get the same scene but from a different perspective. And again, the girls, from Osha's perspective, May just yelled at her, wanted to kill her, and locked her in her room, and yet she still seems concerned with Osha, with May and her. So, like, why would she be that concerned about her sister if her sister just locked her in a room and almost killed her and lit the whole place on fire? But I digress. So they're on the bridge, and this time we get the perspective that the bridge, because from Osha's perspective, the bridge was like held there, and I don't remember if it shows that Soul actually held the bridge or not. From her perspective, I don't think so, but in this one we can see that he's using the force to hold the bridge, and for some reason he's losing it, and he drops the one with May. And then he can't hold Osha, so he runs toward her and grabs her hands. So it kind of implies that he saved Osha instead of May. And then we get an extra scene in the ship where the Jedi woman is getting onto Torben, because that's her Padawan, and he kind of like initiated it all. And then they want to contact the council, and Soul insists, for some reason now he wants to contact the council and tell them the whole truth of what happened, and then for some reason she doesn't want to, because if you put yourself at the mercy of the Jedi Council, now all of a sudden, like, Osha, after everything that she's been through, she's going to need you, kind of implying that he needs to be her master now, and if he threw himself at the mercy of the council, he would probably get arrested or, you know, whatever. And he wouldn't be able to be Osha's master. So the main chick, who is against it this whole time, changed her mind. And I guess it's because it kind of implies that she changes her mind because of what Osha's been through. Like, after everything that she's been through, she's going to need you, kind of thing. But it still just kind of comes off as a little weird, and just, oh, the writers just needed her to change her mind and all this to work out. So he decides to basically be her master. And that's kind of where it ends. So it's just like, it's supposed to be the circumstance that happens, that people saw different things and different perspectives, so we get the same story told multiple ways. And it's supposed to be mysterious and revealing and answering like questions and throwing twists at us, but it just doesn't explain anything very well. It's also very badly written. The characters have no motivations, and they do things only because the writers want them to be done. There's no reason for a lot of the characters to do any of the decisions that they do. And other than Soul's actor and the Sith guy in the other episodes, the acting is horrible. Everybody's really stiff and wooden and just not, the acting is just horrible. And so because of that, it just doesn't work. And the other thing is that it's supposed to be this big mystery, and so they're supposed to be giving you some answers and then leaving you with some other questions and then throwing some twists at you and keeping you hooked on the mystery and the different circumstances. But this was an alternate perspective of the same thing, but they didn't like do anything different or new other than like some of the extra context about what the Jedi were doing. And the scenes that they did include from episode 3 were basically scenes from episode 3, as opposed to like making it slightly different or changing it based on who is watching. I don't know, it didn't quite work. And then again, they're so vague that they're not giving you any answers, and the answers aren't satisfactory, and there's no motivation, so it's really hard to care about characters that don't have clear goals, personalities, or motivations. All of the Jedi feel like the same kind of character except for Soul. And then in this episode, Soul acted completely different. Like, he was obsessed with Osha. We don't know why. He only like watched them for like 2 scenes, so I don't understand his obsession. Even if it was like the Force is telling him, it's like they tried to do a Qui-Gon thing, but like worse than what they did in episode 1 with Qui-Gon. Like, Qui-Gon was composed, he got to know Anakin, he saw Anakin having Force abilities and Jedi abilities and stuff. He had time to get to know Anakin and get to know his mother. He felt for Anakin and for his situation, and he wanted to help him as much as he could. And so he took Anakin before the council. He did everything right according to like the law and how he's supposed to handle that. And when the council denied him, he stayed very calm and composed and tried to reasonably talk his way through why Anakin should be a Jedi, even when they denied him. Whereas this one, they see 2 scenes. There's not any indication that the girls were in any sort of danger or reason for the Jedi to take them. And then He's obsessed and he's a super emotional and all over the place and acting recklessly, and he disobeys orders. He goes against the Jedi Council's wishes and the masters around him. He's not acting like a Jedi, let alone a master Jedi. And it's very, very, very poorly done, even though it's trying to make a nod, like redoing episode 1, but in a really horrible, awful way. So for me, this episode was like a 1-star episode. Like, this was pretty bad, honestly, and I did not enjoy it at all. The last few episodes that have been horrible have been funny to laugh at how bad the writing is, but this one is just horrible for horrible sake and is not funny at all. And it's really lore breaking, because now you have, like, the Jedi seem to imply that, oh, you know, first of all, the leap that the girls were created was just because they have the same symbiote, which it seems like a really far stretch and a jump in logic that wasn't clearly explained. And then, oh, well, that nobody was surprised by that. It was just like, oh, well, it's probably a virgins in the Force, which used the same line Qui-Gon did when he told the council about Anakin. Anakin was a virgins in the Force. And Anakin was the chosen one. That's why he was a virgins in the Force. So these people shouldn't have been a virgins in the Force. There's not just virginses in the Force lying around on a planet somewhere. And these girls should not be either. That was because Anakin was the chosen one. And then, yeah, I don't know. I've lost track at this point. And then that's not counting the lore breaking stuff with Ki-Adi-Mundi and the other Jedi knowing about the fact that the Jedi were sent on a mission, and that some of them now know that there was a Sith that killed them. And even if they don't know about that part yet, like, they do know that there is a girl running around killing Jedi, and she's like a fallen Jedi. And so a lot of these things would have come up in the conversation with Qui-Gon in episode 1. And so either they covered it up, which makes Ki-Adi-Mundi and the Jedi look really bad, or they're stupid, which makes them look bad. So it's a lose-lose situation either way that breaks lore. Not to mention you've got these twin girls being created, life being created on this planet, virginses in the Force just being so common and known that nobody's even surprised by it. The leap in logic about how the symbiont aspect of the girls somehow makes Torben able to figure out that they're artificially created or whatever, which hasn't been explained yet. So, and the people are just, oh, life is just created by a virgins in the Force. That's all it is. You know, it's like, I don't know. These people don't understand Star Wars. And this one actually is frustrating to me. Whereas the other ones have just been hilariously bad. This one's just bad. So I didn't enjoy it at all. 1 star. Honestly, I would give it 0 stars if I could, but because the acting's not that great either, and the fighting is kind of mediocre. So, I mean, the fight with the Wookiee was still pretty cool, but then it's like there's no the part of what makes the fights good is not just the choreography and getting all the martial arts right, or cool flashy moves. What makes fights good, especially in Star Wars, is the emotional weight behind the fight. So in the originals, you had Obi-Wan versus Vader, and even without the context of the prequels, you know that that's an old master, Obi-Wan versus his old master who is now on the dark side, who murdered people. And so you get that. And then episodes 5 and 6 are basically Luke fighting Vader, which, in episode 5 until the twist, it was like the killer of his father. And then in episode 6, it is his father. So the emotional weight of the fight is there. We know both characters, their motivations, their reason for fighting is very clear. And then in the prequels, of course, you had Obi-Wan and, Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul. So we knew that Maul was really fighting hard to be the Sith and finally be open about being a Sith and following his master's plan. Qui-Gon wasn't believed by the council, and he knew that the Sith, I don't know if he knew the Sith would probably try to take Anakin, but or would find out about Anakin, but the motivations for everybody was clear. They were also trying to save and help Naboo. Episode 2, you had Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku, and it was like the fate, and then Yoda versus Dooku, which was a master versus an old Padawan, and it was also about stopping the Clone Wars before the war began. And then episode 3, of course, you had Yoda versus Sidious, which was trying to stop the Sith, the last chance to stop this after the Jedi were all killed. And then it was Anakin versus Obi-Wan, who were like brothers with each other. after Anakin slaughtered the Jedi and the Jedi are being destroyed. So the emotional weight of these duels is what makes a good fight, not just the flashy moves and the good martial arts and the choreography. And there is no motivations for any of the characters, no goals or personalities for them, and therefore there is no emotional weight to any of the fights, and so it just falls flat. And then you had on top of that the fact that the Wookiee was only fighting because the writers wanted it to be the Wookiee because he's the biggest guy. It just 0 stars. I didn't like this one. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the meantime, if you liked my review of this episode of The Acolyte, then stay tuned for the next one because we're in it, guys, and we're just going to grit our teeth and try to bear this atrocity.